Hello, students of history and social studies. This is a brief lecture about the different forms of government that we see in our world today. I'd like to spend my time talking about 5 overarching forms of government, and those are autocracies, democracies, oligarchies, theocracies, and anarchy. An autocracy is a form of government where one person has all the power. And there are actually 2 different forms of autocracies. The first one is a monarchy. And there are 2 different types of monarchies. There's an absolute monarchy and there's a constitutional monarchy. We don't see absolute monarchies all that often anymore, but really an absolute monarchy is when a king or queen has ultimate authority. Today, in places such as England, we more often see constitutional monarchies. So in a constitutional monarchy, you do have a king and a queen, king or queen, and they are the head of the state, but they work in conjunction with another part of government or another form of government like a democracy. So the constitutional monarchs are often in charge of diplomatic missions, and they are a lot of times mainly ceremonial, such as in England. The second type of autocracy is a dictatorship. And a dictatorship is when one person has complete control over citizens and their lives. And an example of this would be Adolf Hitler and also Joseph Stalin of Russia. The second form of government is democracy. And a democracy is a form of government in which citizens hold the political power. And just like in autocracy, there are 2 forms of democracies. There is representative and direct. A representative democracy is when citizens, they might not have time, or there might be too many of them to actually deal with the day-to-day decisions that need to be made in a government. And so citizens actually go through a process of voting. There's an election, and they elect leaders in order to represent them. And those leaders, based on the will of the people, actually make the day-to-day decisions. There's also something called a direct democracy. And a direct democracy often works better in smaller organizations or smaller countries. And so this is when citizens are directly involved in the work of governing. And oftentimes you see this in states or in town halls in cities. And people directly do the work in these places. They discuss, they vote, and they help people within their smaller government institutions make decisions. The third form of government that I would like to talk about is oligarchy. An oligarchy is a form of government in which a small group of people have all the political power, and these people are not elected. And an example of this would be a junta. A junta is a small group of military officers that take over and rule the country by force. And often this happens when a state or a country's government has failed. Military may still have power, they may still have weapons, and they are able to take over the country by force because they have that type of power. And then they do both. They do both the military work and the work of the government. And this most often has happened in places in Central Africa. The fourth type of government that I would like to talk about is the theocracy. So a theocracy is a form of government that recognizes God or a divine being as the ultimate authority. And there aren't a lot of countries that are total theocracies, but the country of Iran is both a democracy and a theocracy. So Iran actually does elect their leaders, but they also abide by Islamic law. And they thread Islamic law into their civilian law. So therefore, that country is an example of both a democracy and a theocracy. The last form of government is anarchy. And anarchy is absolutely no government at all. So there are no laws and no rules, and oftentimes this leads to absolute chaos. And again, anarchy usually follows the fall of a government or a state. And really, there are no examples of that going on today. However, places like Somalia and Syria have gone through stages of anarchy, which then leaves their country open and vulnerable to organizations to form such as ISIS.